having me here. I was really excited about this conference and an opportunity to come speak with you all and have this conversation. It's something I've been thinking a lot about this past year. I just moved down to Southern California last December and am the community programs manager down at Chino Basin Conservation District. Has anyone been there before? A couple. So we're just down about 10 miles, or 10 minutes on the other side of the 10. And what I'd love to talk to you all about today is some of the large challenges that we're running into with water conservation in Southern California right now, many of which I'm sure you're very familiar, and kind of what process we've started in our K-12 programs with the community to try to address some of the barriers we're finding towards this ecological civilization in terms of how are we going to manage our resources in Southern California in the future. So I'll start with this awful slide. How many times have you seen this drought monitor? This one was from just a couple days ago. We're still in the drought. This is our 6th year. And with climate change predictions, we're only going to be seeing more droughts, and they're only going to become more severe over time. So that's our reality. That's what we need to adapt to. That's what we need to be resilient to. And some serious infrastructure changes need to happen at both the residential and commercial scale throughout the region. And so that's something that we think about a lot as our rivers are really low, and as we're not able to rely so much on imported water coming from other regions. We need to be more locally resilient and independent from these other water sources. So the Chino Basin Water Conservation District, we're kind of a unique agency. We don't sell water. We are a conservation district, and we focus specifically on this region here. It's the Chino groundwater basin region. So we're just on the other side of Claremont, but Montclair, Rancho Cucamonga, Chino Hills, Chino, and some of those regions. We have Mount Baldy and the wetlands in our area, in our watershed that we talk to students about. And our charge as the Chino Basin Water Conservation District is to ensure that we have a viable water supply for generations to come. We're one of the largest groundwater basins in Southern California, and are really lucky to have not seen the subsidence that other areas in the state are seeing, and to not have our water table drop at such quick levels that we've been seeing in other parts of the state, and we want to continue that. This groundwater source provides about 60% of our drinking water. But here we are in Southern California, and our region is poised to grow very quickly. Ontario is growing tremendously fast. And as that continues, and as we continue to suburbanize, we're seeing more and more irrigation, we're seeing more and more hardscape and less area for water to soak through and recharge our groundwater aquifer, which is a challenge. We're not just seeing high water use, we're also seeing lack of area for water to actually soak into the ground. So how do you change that? And that's kind of our mission. How do we change that? So we do that through demonstration. We have a huge demonstration garden down in Montclair to show different ways that you can both use less water, but also allow water to percolate into the ground. We do it through education. So we have programs from pre-K to gray. I focus primarily on K-12, but I'll talk a little bit more about some of the other stuff we do. And then percolate. So we have these basins. You may have seen them as you're driving around. They're these big kind of moonscapes off the side of the road that collect stormwater and allow it to slowly percolate into the groundwater basin. And this is just a picture of our site. If you haven't been, you should come check it out. But we have a demonstration garden here. We have this, it's not LEED certified, but an energy efficient, water efficient building and center with tons of information for the public around where our water comes from and why it's important to conserve. We demonstrate lots of different bioswales, low impact development strategies for both cities, commercial sites, and also residents. And this is just a picture of our garden. We try to show all the different kinds of aesthetics you can have in a drought-tolerant garden. And we have flowers blooming year-round to show that water efficient doesn't have to mean gravel and cactus, which a lot of people think. And so our mission is really huge in that we're trying to get the public to change their behavior and change their idea as to what a suburban and urban landscape can look like. It doesn't have to look like that. And there are ways that more of our landscape can look like this, even in an urban setting. And this thrills me to no end when I think about education, because there's so many benefits to a landscape like this. We're saving water, that's our primary focus, but we're also improving water quality by allowing water to soak into the ground rather than run off. We have this decentralized groundwater recharge, so instead of having these big pits throughout the region, suddenly everyone's yard can be a part of the watershed again and be allowed to have rainwater soak into the ground. We have climate appropriate vegetation, so vegetation that's ready for climate change has been adapted and has evolved to an arid environment. And with that comes shade. We run into a lot of issues with thermal issues in cities, and so doing this too can help with that issue. We have the aesthetics, it's beautiful, it creates a sense of place that we've kind of lost in this urban environment. These places are places that you can love, and when students walk through our garden, you can just see it in their eyes. And then of course, providing habitat for pollinators. So there's all these great benefits that come with water conservation, and that's what we kind of thread through our education programs. But again, there's so many barriers to getting homeowners, to getting cities, to getting commercial property owners to start to take some of these practices into their management strategies or into their home maintenance. And so we try to provide opportunities for all of our audiences, pre-K to grade, to get engaged in this idea, get engaged in this process. And we're trying to build this conservation ethic, ideally, in our community around this, and provide opportunities along their journey to have them become both inspired by the landscape, but also get the skills and knowledge and kind of solutions that they need to implement that. And ideally, along this journey, there would be intergenerational learning, where kids are teaching their parents, who are teaching their grandparents, or grandparents teaching their kids how to garden. And peer-to-peer learning, ideally, or creating dialogue amongst each generation as well in this. And so we try to foster a place where that can happen. But when we think about education, we think about schoolyards a lot, and how there are these perfect kind of public centers where we could be both demonstrating these great practices, but also providing amazing learning environments for students, bringing them back to what they call it eco-revelatory design, where you have these thriving ecosystems back in these public spaces that didn't exist before. And so to do that, we kind of bring in various elements of environmental education into our programming. So the first kind of principle of environmental education is to provide awareness and sensitivity to the environment. And this, we were just talking with Philip, is something that sounds like Whitehead has also put forward as romance, but knowledge without love will not stick. But if love comes first, knowledge is sure to follow. That comes from this great book called Beyond Ecophobia by David Sobel. And he really pioneered the idea of place-based learning, that you can't be scaring students about all of the environmental issues in the world until they've found a place to love in their backyard or in their schoolyard. So we focus a lot on that in our K-12 program, especially K through 4. So they come on field trips, we take them throughout the watershed, we show them the place that they live in, and we show them, and they explore on their own all of the wonderful smells, sights, sounds, critters that come with that. The second kind of tenet of environmental education is knowledge and understanding. So to do that, we have students go through learning by kind of probing their curiosity. So they build investigations and explorations through a learning process driven by curiosity and observation. So this is inquiry-based education. And this is where I have a lot of hope, because this is becoming kind of a principal strand through the next generation science standards that's being implemented and beginning to become implemented in California schools. So we have students going out answering their own questions in our garden. We give them instruments. They have to figure out what those instruments do, what they can measure, what questions they can answer with them, and just build that understanding around and that curiosity around their environment. So here he's looking at the surface temperature of a cactus and the gravel to see how hot that gravel will get on a hot day, and how that cactus has evolved to stay a little bit cooler. here they're looking at the differences in soil moisture. We have different turf plots to show how much water they use, but then some lower water alternatives. And here you can see this plot. This part's not mowed and this part is, and this is a practice that we advise if people do have turf because it holds moisture a lot more. We don't tell them that, but they explore it and find that out for themselves. So we try to have all of our programming go through kind of this inquiry-based education. Here's students who wouldn't play in the compost, but as soon as you give them gloves, they're very, very keen to explore the critters. So just figuring out, like, what is it going to take to get them beyond ecophobia, to begin identifying and kind of empathizing with their environment. The third tenet, developing attitudes of concern and motivation to improve. So this comes a little bit later. With K through 3, we really just want them to love their environment and give them those opportunities. But as they get older, kind of building those attitudes of concern, but that motivation to improve their environment. So here we start talking, as they get into 5th, 6th, and middle school, we start talking a little bit more about some of the issues that we run into here. This is one of the percolation basins, and we're talking about watersheds here. Students modeling a watershed, the mountains up here, and where all the water collects, and the idea that a river and stream goes down to the ocean, but thinking about all of the different elements of pollution, non-point source pollution and whatnot that take place in a watershed. And then, of course, the skills to identify and help resolve those challenges that we see. So once the students get a little bit older, we use a lot of project-based learning principles, which I love. So the idea here is that the students are engaged in their community, they're breaking down the walls, you're bringing community members in and giving the students, or having the students identify a real issue in their community, an authentic issue, and having the students explore that on their own through sustained inquiry, giving them voice and choice in what solution they want to find for that issue, and most importantly, giving them time to give each other feedback and then present in a setting where community members are giving them feedback. So making it real. It's not just a report they're handing in, but something that is really valued by the community. And I'll show an example of one that we're doing with students right now. And then lastly, giving them opportunities to participate in activities that do lead to change. So there's lots of service learning activities that we do with middle school and high school students, giving them, kind of challenging them to find ways to capture water on their school sites or have their own composting systems. All of these different projects that can help them address the issue of water conservation in their communities. So I'll just show you one that we're doing around this project-based learning idea, this design to harvest contest. We're doing it with middle school students. And the way that we framed this was through a train-the-trainer model. So we had 40 teachers come to our site in the summer, and we walk through this training that they can then implement however they want in the classroom. But the challenge is to students find ways that you can collect water on your school site and think about all of the other benefits that you might be able to provide to your school by doing this. So they do this by investigating how different surfaces impact our water supply. So they test different types of soil to see what the difference is in their permeability, what would allow water to recharge the aquifer, what would allow water to stay in the root zone for plants. And then the big idea is to get the students outside of their classroom, which can be a real challenge, and have them map their schoolyard and figure out, well, where are the pervious surfaces? Where is the concrete? Where would water be collecting after a rainstorm? What could we put there? And then they do a modeling activity where we give them like a schoolyard model that's all impervious, so all paved, and they have to design a solution. We give them different strategies like bioswales or cisterns or permeable pavers, all kinds of ideas, and we give them a budget, and they actually design a solution for the schoolyard that's going to capture the most water and test it, and then evaluate, well, which one was the cheapest, but which one captured the most water, and what were some of the other benefits that were involved. And then the last piece is them then making a design for their school and presenting it to conservation professionals. So they'll be doing that in February, and we'll be recognizing them through a community forum, which again makes it authentic and valuable to them and memorable ideally. And so the cool thing about this, this contest is that it's no longer kind of a unique idea. It's becoming a part of the way that the science ed community is moving, especially in California, and that gives me a lot of hope. The next generation science standards are really cool. They're built on that inquiry-based inquiry-based learning idea, and they are really focused on having students go through the practices of being an engineer and of being a scientist and of being curious and figuring out how to test different ideas and design solutions rather than just memorize. And I think that that's gonna really set up some great thinkers in the next generation. I wish that I had grown up with this system. In middle school, so the performance expectation or the standard that we're hitting with this contest, it's awesome. Evaluating competing design solutions for maintaining biodiversity and ecosystem services. So that's what the students are asked to do and asked to be able to do by the end of their middle school experience. The great thing is that this is a little bit more advanced, but they even have expectations like this for second grade students to design solutions and think about different criteria that would make a solution better or worse than another. So it's really setting up, I think, our next generation to be great thinkers. And the nice thing about this framework too is that environmental education is threaded through. So those principles of how humans are impacting our systems and what the social, environmental, and economic costs might be for that is a huge kind of tenet of the framework. And again, I think that that's going to be really valuable in the way that our next generation is thinking about the world, and the teachers, because the teachers are having to reframe how they've taught and how they even think about systems. So this particular project, these are kind of the 3D learning principles. There's science and engineering practices. There's these cross-cutting concepts that you keep hitting through every single science class you take. Stability and change is one, patterns is another, cause and effect is another. So just how these concepts work in all different kinds of disciplines, and then some disciplinary core ideas. So I think that framework in California, and it is being adopted nationwide at various stages by different states. I think that is going to really help set up our institutions to have more creative thinkers, have thinkers that are not just focused on one element, but looking at these multiple benefits, and ideally also helping to create this conservation ethic by having the environment be a larger role in our sciences. I'm going to skip through this. These are just some of the other programs that we do to kind of foster this conservation ethic as folks kind of move through our programs. And then this last piece I just wanted to mention, with going back to those landscapes that we would like to see at schools and kind of in public sites, and then eventually be adopted into residential landscapes. One of the biggest knowledge gaps right now is how do you maintain them? How do you install them? Landscapers haven't had to deal with native plants necessarily in the past. There's a huge knowledge gap. So we're bringing these trainings to help different landscapers get those skills and kind of build a greener workforce. So we do those trainings at our site, but we're also starting to implement them into vocational training programs at high schools and community colleges, which is really exciting. And the kind of emotional response that we've gotten from some of the professional landscapers is it's really amazing, because they've been looking for these resources. They want to be able to be a part of this landscape shift, but they don't have the skill set. They haven't been trained. They haven't had that opportunity, or it's really expensive. So I think that those opportunities are also key building blocks to kind of creating this urban landscape that is more sustainable.
Becky, what's D3?
Oh, D3. So this is a really neat group out of LA. They're called the Green Gardens Group.
Oh.
Yeah, and they teach this training. It's called the Watershed Wise Approach to Landscaping. Yeah. So it's really neat. The idea is it's a little bit more integrated. Landscapers are learning how to calculate how much rainfall will come in a given storm, how much is going to run off, and then how you can site and design a rain garden to capture that water. That's something that landscapers don't necessarily have a skill set to do unless they were a landscape architect or went through some kind of professional training. So we're really excited about that one. It also talks about removing soils and creating removing turf, creating living soils that can then help the rest of the ecosystem thrive. So a really neat way of thinking about residential landscapes. So that's pretty much where I'm going to wrap up. I mean, so I think we had some really great conversations at this table, and I'm sure you all did too, so I'm excited to hear more. But I have a more optimistic view than I would have guessed working in the public sector in Southern California around water. There's lots of challenges, but I think the opportunities for not only landscape change, but social change around building this conservation ethic, I think there's a huge opportunity right here, and we're in this shift, and it's exciting, and I think that all of these different institutions are kind of aligning right now. This is my personal perspective, but with the next generation science standards requiring more community involvement, more designing solutions, more scientific investigations, with the water conservation movement needing more public participation in these programs. There's just all of these kind of obvious fits, and it makes me excited for our future despite the challenges that we do face. So hopefully we can move from this and move forward into these more ecologically designed landscapes that not only save water, but provide habitat, provide beautiful learning spaces for students and kids, and bring back the sense of place that at least the Inland Empire, I think, is beginning to lose with suburbanization. Oh, and this is my last sentence. So this is David Solvable again. So I think his advice to the world is great. It's a simple proposition, really. Bring education back into the neighborhood, connect students with adult mentors, conservation commissions, and local businesses. Get students and teachers into the community, into the woods and on the streets, closer to beauty and true grit. Get the town engineer, the mayor, the environmental educators onto the schoolyard and inside the four walls of the schools. These are the places we all belong. So this idea that the education systems could be more integrated, and in doing this, we're really all benefiting. So with that.
Cool. Awesome. So we've got a good time now for discussion, questions. You're welcome to field your own, or
yeah, whatever. Maybe just do anybody in the group, right? Is the whole group right now? Is that what you're?
whole group conversation.
Great.
With Becky. Thoughts, questions, things you want to bring up? John Cobb's got some.
As you were talking, I was jealous. I think they're trying to do some good things in the public schools in Claremont, but I'm wondering, what I've heard doesn't sound like Claremont is as far advanced as what you are doing.
Oh, very much.
Do you know anything about the situation? Since we are neighbors, I hope we can learn from you.
You know, I don't know too much about Claremont Unified, except that you have a great school gardens program.
Yes.
And many of the schools, at least in the Inland Empire that we work mostly with Ontario Montclair School District. They don't have a district-run school gardens program like that.
Oh.
I think you're really lucky to have, and from what I understand, it's fairly well integrated into and out of the classroom with teachers. But I don't know that much.
But the sustained program that you have described, that begins with just what we by head is called the romantic stage, and it goes on to precision and so forth. Is that statewide, or is that something that is just in your district? Or?
It's something that it's kind of the theory that we use to build our programs here. I think it's common at other kind of environmental education institutions that are moving forward with the place-based, inquiry-based learning.
It sounded like everything we were talking about, we wished would happen someday. And then it sounded like, well, sure, that's what everybody's doing now. I mean, that's wonderful. I'm glad to be way out of date, but...
Well, the thing is, I don't think everyone's doing it. I think we're lucky in that we have we're a public agency, but we're small and flexible, and we have the right staff. And yeah, and it's worked out well. I think part of it is having more interdisciplinary college programs as well. A lot of our staff have come out of those, whether it's a grad program or even liberal arts. So being able to think about education and science and kind of public policy all at once and not being so siloed has allowed for a lot of collaboration across departments. So I think that is really valuable as well.
How well do you work with other agencies? I'm thinking of the agency that is responsible for a huge cement culvert or waterway that our bicycle path crosses over by Monte Vista, near Monte Vista, I think. We cross over, no.
You might be right.
You're right.
Well,
You might be talking about
You're right.
It's near there somewhere. And every time I go over there, there's huge amounts of water going down this thing. And I would like to think that obviously it's going to a settling pond. Or there's some place further down where they take all the contaminants out of it and it gets reused. But I have no way of knowing this. Are we just wasting this water that is runoff?
This is a great question. Lance actually biked past our facility a few months ago. It's like, what is the deal with all this water? So depending on the time of year, depending on how much water is available up north, and depending on who's willing to buy it, we will have imported water coming through, which is likely what you've seen these past few months. And yes, some of it is getting sent down to Orange County. So in August, all of that water you were seeing through channels is going down to Orange County and was being recharged into their groundwater aquifers or treated for drinking water. Right now, you'll see a lot. We're getting 4,000 acre feet, which is enough to provide about 8,000 families with water for the year from the State Water Project from up north that's being recharged into our basins. So it's not being wasted, but it is, I think it's important to know that the last few years we haven't had access to that water because of the drought, and it's so expensive to bring down, both in terms of money and in energy, that I think by doing more of this decentralized kind of distributed percolation when it does rain, and thinking more about opportunities to save water and recycle water, I think we'll be more resilient into the future than relying on that water.
Well, I'm glad to hear that answer. I will spread it to my bike buddies because they're asking the same question.
Yeah, we have so many people come in and ask us. We actually just made an online map where you can kind of track it to help show where.
And I was very involved in Major W, which was an attempt to buy the water company for Claremont. And of course, what we felt was that the water company had no financial incentive to save any of this water.
Yeah, there's definitely, it's interesting with water agencies now having to do more conservation programs with the drought and with different policy measures. And I think they do a good job, but I think having resource conservation districts and water conservation districts like us who don't have that conflict of interest, I think is really important. And I think there's big opportunity there, especially in California with the resource conservation districts. They're all over the state and can play such a great role in providing integrative education around this that water agencies just don't have the capacity necessarily to do at the same level.
I'm wondering, is there any national or statewide information exchange for information either on the kind of school programs you do or the water conservation effort?
Yeah, that's a great question. So statewide, there's a council called the California Urban Water Conservation Council that has done some really neat work. It's made up of water agencies, nonprofits, and so kind of environmental interests, and then special districts, and they identify kind of the key barriers to, especially, they have a landscape committee that we work with that has been identifying the key barriers to this type of transformation and how you can make the kind of business case for this. And so they do a lot of kind of synthesis research and recommendations that get sent out to all of the participating agencies. In terms of education, we're actually hosting the Department of Water Resources Water Education Committee this coming week, with the hope to provide some more of these kind of inquiry-based and project-based learning approaches to water conservation, because I think there's so much great opportunity for water agencies to be doing this type of work, and oftentimes they'll take less community-based programs and more turnkey programs, because that's what their staff has capacity for. So anyways, I think there's more and more of these meetings taking place so that best practices can be disseminated.
What's your event tomorrow, Becky?
Oh yeah, we have. Well, I don't want to overlap with your event tomorrow.
No.
It's okay.
So we have a landscape and water conservation festival tomorrow. It's from 9 to 2. It's free for families anywhere, and we have a bunch of workshops, so landscaping workshops on a lot of the things that come along with these sustainable landscapes, and then all kinds of educational activities for kids as well, and like pumpkin patch and face painting and all that fun stuff. So yeah, it's from 9 to 2. If you want to take a quick break and come down, we're really close. Should be fun.
During our lunch break.
Yeah.
So part of what draws us together is this inquiry what the big picture is, and the question of whether it can act like a magnet or a guide as we move from these different 6 areas. That's sort of our theme of our conference. So this question is a little bit personal. What draws you? What's the big picture, either that motivates you, or you think it's all heading toward, or how would you put into your own words? Because, I mean, you've given us 26 concrete things to do, but how do you wrap it together, or where does it all point, and what draws it? If that's not too personal.
No, it's not. I never would have guessed I'd be living in suburbia in Southern California. Here I am in Monrovia. I spent a lot of time researching and doing education programs in rural and kind of forested watersheds. So here I have been so jazzed about this work because I think of all the needs and all of the multiple benefits of water conservation. We're thinking about outdoor urban landscapes that need this transition. And so I think that's what it is. It's with all of these programs, we're addressing so many different social, environmental, economic issues in these communities that need it.
Where is it heading? What will the world look like in 100 years if they really listen to Chino, Basin water?
They listened and they funded it.
Two things.
You'd see this everywhere. I think you wouldn't see stormwater. Ideally, you wouldn't see stormwater. Stormwater is now viewed much more as a resource for our water portfolios. So you wouldn't see that, and as a result, you'd see spaces that have been built to collect that all throughout our cities. And hopefully those would be learning environments. They'd be tied to learning environments, tied to parks, building that sense of place, and providing all of those environmental benefits.
Okay, and still bigger. If we do that with water, and we do it with education, which is what you work in, and we do it with transportation, and we do it with urban construction, you talk about what was announced, suburbanization. Never heard that before. And in these different areas, right? I mean, different sectors of society, and all we do this as much advanced in each sector as you're describing. What would our life be like?
I think we'd have a more ecological civilization. I mean, I think you can build the environment, but if we as kind of learners and residents of that environment aren't trained or aren't really ever given the opportunity to observe or spend time thinking about those places, then they won't be as valued or maintained or cared for. So I think if these were in place and if our education system was set up so that people understood how to love and care and sustain those environments, we'd be in a good spot. That's idealist.
That was we're idealists, we wouldn't be sitting here. I think there were a couple other people that wanted to get in a word. John, before you go, I've got 3 other people who haven't spoken yet. Zach?
Just a general question, what are the biggest barriers that you sort of mentioned that earlier, challenges in doing this kind of work, putting into practice?
I think it's funding and skills and knowledge. Funding in terms of it's not necessarily cheap to transform your landscape, and then skills and knowledge, not having the professional industry out there right now to really understand how to maintain and sustain these. in getting people to care. But I think that that's changing with the drought over the past 6 years. More and more people are aware of the issue. But it's easy to take a short shower. It's easier to use less water when you're washing your dishes. It's hard to rethink your landscape. And in the public sector, it's hard to maintain these. So you see a lot of failed projects that provide a bad name for the transformation process. So I think that's a big challenge.
Before John, I saw one other hand. John, go ahead. John Thorne. Did you want to ask, you were going to say something else or ask another question?
Well, I had a question. The church I first served in the Pico Union District of Los Angeles, the houses did not look like this. This seems to be a very yuppie sort of thing. It doesn't relate to the people that I worked with who didn't have any grass growing in their yard very often. How do we develop a water program that relates to people who are not of my class?
This is a great question and another challenge. So we have looked at that in terms of a lot of people aren't homeowners, right? And so they're not in a position to make decisions, or it requires a lot of funding. So the way that our demonstration garden set up was, you can kind of see, we have these kind of these artistic features. They're like facades, and they're meant to look like and be the same size and shape of the, let's just go through it all backwards. Here, these guys. These are throughout our garden, and they're kind of this shape and size of the homes in kind of the Montclair, Ontario area. And so the idea is that when people are walking through the pocket gardens, it gives them a sense of scale and color and what they could have outside of their yard. But then in terms of the have and have-nots, kind of we provide free homeowner workshops almost every Saturday. And there's 3 tracks. There's Transform Your Landscape. So that's for those who are just ready to go, have the funding, have the interest, have the land to do it. We have one that's called Grow Your Garden. That's kind of maintenance of what you've already got. How can you be more efficient with what you've already got without having to make that big commitment? And then we have Fun with Flora, and that's kind of just getting people comfortable with plant materials. So it's a lot of succulent kind of Pinterest projects, and the idea is that that's accessible to anybody. You go home with a pumpkin filled with succulents, you put it on your table, and you may not be interested in the environment or your outdoor landscape, but that's like the first step to kind of the love piece, and just getting your hands dirty and comfortable. So those are the ways that we're trying to address that. And then with the K-12 programs, I mean, all the students that come through, we have about 8,000 that come through a year. All of them are coming from free and reduced schools in our community. So they're getting access to this space, which is free and open to the public as well, 6 days a week. But in terms of the transformation piece, yeah, that's a barrier.
Some 80% did not own their own homes.
But I think there's opportunity there for those that are in the landscaping industry to play a part in it, and it's an empowering part. The industry is often referred to as mow, blow, and go. That's what they've done on these lawns for decades, and now they are a central piece of this transformation. And I think to provide empowerment there and skills and training that's affordable, I think that's one way to kind of build that in.
Okay, we're transitioning to a little table thing, but Zach, do you want to say something before we close?
I have a quick question, if I could. So you mentioned funding was one of the key issues, and also this work is happening a lot in a sort of decentralized way. So I wonder if a lot of it is sort of out of pocket to get to the last question, or if there's other funding structures and sort of interagency support in different communities for providing for this sort of transition, which I think, especially getting to the last question, you sort of need.
Yeah, so there's been big turf rebate programs. I don't know if you're aware of those. The last few years, people were getting up to $3.75 per square foot to remove their turf and put in something else. So there was some funding mechanisms to make that transition a lot easier. Agencies have kind of pulled back from that. There was a lot of lessons learned, and now we're kind of revamping those programs so that they're more sustainable and successful. So there's that. We do simple things like free irrigation audits, so we'll go to someone's house and just troubleshoot their system and let them know where they're having issues. So not necessarily saying take out your turf, but saying, hey, you've got a system that we can at least update a little bit, just by reprogramming the controller or whatever it is. So there's lots of services like that. There's these weather-based irrigation controllers that are kind of smart controllers that focus on soil moisture and climate. And so we've been doing a lot of free direct installs of those. And yeah, there's various programs like that that agencies are providing.
Cool. Join me again in thanking Becky for. Just briefly, we want you to turn back to your table and just say, where did Becky's talk take you? There's no script. It's just, what did it make you think? Big question, little question, I'm tearing out my lawn, whatever. So just share. If your moderator could hold each person to a minute, because we keep finding out that one person talks too long and 3 people don't get to say a word. So if you could just, somebody could help people say thank you for that comment next. Because we are moving upstairs. Eric is actually available at 4:45, so we're just going to do this for about 5 minutes and then gradually transition. We recognize that we're giving you lots of exercise up and down, but that's actually really good for oxygen and brain. If Becky has time, she might sort of wander with me around. If you want to tap her on the shoulder and ask her to answer a question. That's great. So go. One thing, where did it take you? Where did her talk take you? Anywhere is fine. I guess. But I think we were getting
and as a beekeeper, I'm super sensitive.
so there are I've been lecturing for 20 years on
well, we were just walking on the Claremont College, and so I noticed that it's things that seem pretty difficult
Sort of
water
down on it and ask
it was really interesting at Stanford. At Stanford, the response to the drought was to turn off the fountain, which continued to water the which is totally like way more measured. It was like a very cynical move to turn off the this spring. So yeah, it's environmental oriented.
Tomorrow.
But if you don't really talk about what's going on,
and if you're knowledgeable about try to make yourself there is a vocational track that's valuable, and we're afraid to schools have reproducing this neighborhood we're going to
I was young.
just a quarter, and here we're going to have more, but as an enclosed school, in terms of all in every school, yes, I want to be going no, it's going to be some facilities that start with more than others. Where to push the funding, we can take it on ourselves, should I be do it, how can we do it better, and train the lives, it starts with
Learning and competition, whatever. That's like, I think, it was inspiring because I was doing directly from your class with Betty as you know. It's easy to train 70%
to the garden, this is like,
Skipping a song.
I do it.
Right. Doing those here.
So, that's tiny, or large. But if we can find some way to both do the things like that, and so many kids was in the car, but he didn't ride a bicycle.
Yeah, you need to maybe put some more people
Sorry,
from
that was too
Tucson
long,
here
but
that know how to
yeah,
make
I'm trying to answer.
it good.
For us, the big question, what is it?